Chapter 18. The Amazing Cache. Dave said no more about the nettles in his bed, but Bert burst out. He thinks Chuck did it. At once, Bess came to the defense of her cowboy friend. He wouldn't do such a thing, she declared. I just know he didn't do it. Nancy spoke up too in Chuck's defense. She told Dave that the Hamilton Ranch cowboy was a very fine person. Though he was jealous of Dave's friendship with Bess, Chuck would not play a mean trick on him. Certainly not one like putting nettles in a bed, she added. I'm not sure, Dave replied. He said he still felt pretty uncomfortable from the prickles. I've had 2 baths, but my skin's itching and stinging. I must have 1,000,000 punctures in my back. I'm so sorry, said Bess. Maybe the discomfort will wear off soon. The 6 young people went in to breakfast, and by the time the meal was over, Dave seemed to feel like himself again. As they got up and walked toward the lobby, Nancy said, I have a little errand to do. Will you all excuse me? I won't be gone long. Promise? Ned teased. Promise, she responded. The group expected her to tell them what her errand was, but the young detective did not explain. Nancy walked to the bunkhouse. Most of the cowboys had left for their day's work, but in one area of the building she could hear voices. Nancy stood at the doorway and listened. A man was saying, That was a rotten trick to play. He deserved it, another cowboy replied. The first man went on, Pop expects all of us to be gentlemen, Stevie. That includes not playing annoying tricks on guests at this ranch. I don't care, Steve replied. I hate these dudes that come here from the coast. They think they're pretty smooth. They need to be taken down a peg. Nancy wondered, are they talking about our Emerson friends? Stevie went on, That guy Dave came out to steal Chuck's girl, and I aim to fix it otherwise. And don't ask me to apologize to him. Listen, if you squeal... Nancy did not wait to hear the rest. She ran all the way back to the ranch house lobby where her friends were talking. Breathless, she hurried up to them. Chuck didn't put those nettles in your bed, Dave, she said. It was a cowboy named Stevie. Nancy related what she had just overheard at the bunkhouse. Where is he? Dave asked, excited. I'll go there right now and have it out with this Stevie. Please don't, Bess begged him. Let Pop Hamilton settle this. Dave finally agreed, and Nancy went off to find the rancher and report to him. She met him coming outside. Pop said he was looking for Nancy and her friends. Did you want to see me? He asked. Nancy said yes, told him about the nettles, and identified the perpetrator. I don't want to be a tattletale, but... Pop interrupted her. I'm glad you told me. I'll see to it that no more pranks are played on your friends. He frowned. I don't allow this kind of nonsense around here. He walked with her to the others in the group and said with a smile, If you all plan to go riding this morning, I have a chore for you. Any takers? What is it? Bert asked. Up in the west field there are 2 cows with newborn calves. I'd like 4 of them brought down here. I'd love to see the calves, Bess said. I'll bet they're darling. Dave asked, But what do you do with a newborn calf? Pop laughed. Don't worry. The mother will take care of her baby. You'd be surprised at how strong a day-old calf is. It can travel for miles and miles. But sometimes a timber wolf will attack and kill it. The animal will be safer here. Bess, George, Bert, and Dave agreed to do the errand. Nancy told Pop she would be taking a flying lesson and hoped that Ned would go along to watch her at the controls. Ned accepted the invitation with a broad smile. She wondered why he was grinning. Did he think all this flying business was a joke and that she was not much of a pilot? I'll show him, she thought, and smiled back. Pop offered to drive Nancy and Ned to the flying school, so in a few minutes the group separated. Bert and Dave went to choose ponies for their ride, while Nancy and Ned were driven to Excello in a ranch wagon. Bruce was waiting for Nancy at the school's office. She introduced Ned and asked Bruce, "Could we possibly take up a 4-seater today? I'd love to have Ned go along." "I think so. Let me check." He consulted the flight schedule board, then made a request of the manager. Bruce came out of the office a few minutes later and said, "Everything's okay. We'll take Lady Luck." Ned Nickerson said he hoped the craft would live up to its name. Then he maneuvered Bruce aside and whispered something to him. The pilot asked a couple of questions, then nodded. Both young men smiled and returned to Nancy. Neither told her what had been said, and she did not ask. In a few minutes, the trio was ready for takeoff. Nancy's performance with the plane was so smooth and effortless that Ned was delighted. "I see Bruce is a great instructor," he commented. The flying school pilot responded with a twinkle in his eyes. "And Nancy is a great student." The girl flyer blushed a bit and headed the craft toward the great cloud. As they neared it, Nancy told Ned about the mystery and the Indian legend. She ended by saying, "We think it's a hideaway for the Sky Phantom when anyone else is nearby." Ned remarked, "That's a fantastic story. I wonder how the Sky Phantom gets through when all the electrical equipment in your plane went haywire." "That's part of the mystery," Nancy replied. "I hope that pilot doesn't show up for a while so we can investigate on the ground." She sat down at the nearest suitable spot, which was about 1/4 of a mile from the edge of the giant cloud. Bruce said, "With all the strange things that have been happening lately, I think it best if I stay here and guard the plane. You go off and investigate." Nancy and Ned headed directly for the area beneath the cloud. When they reached the area below the edge of it, the couple began searching the ground minutely. Almost directly under the middle of the cloud, Nancy stopped abruptly. Excited, she called Ned to her side and pointed at the area. "Here's a spot that looks newly dug," she said, "and newly raked over. Do you think something might have been buried here?" Ned nodded. "Let's see if we can find anything underneath." At once, the two began digging up the dirt with their heels and fingers. In a few minutes, they made a discovery. They had unearthed a long, narrow wooden box. Painted on the top of it was the word, "Rifles." Nancy and Ned were so astonished, they just stood still, staring first at each other, then down at the marked box. "Let's see if there's anything else hidden here," Nancy urged. They hunted around and came to a section that had not been tampered with recently, but looked different from the surrounding area. The grass growing over it was very short and sparse compared to the longer growth around it. "Want to dig here?" Ned asked. "Yes." Again, the two sleuths dug their heels into the dirt. It was sun-parched and dry, and harder to dislodge than the other spot. Ned kicked at it vigorously with his heel, while Nancy brushed aside the loose dirt and felt around in the hole he had made. Presently, her efforts were rewarded. "Ned, I think I found a second box," she said, excited. Together they worked vigorously, and a few minutes later had uncovered part of another box. Apparently this one was square. The two discoverers stared at the print on its lid. Bombs! The couple's first thought was to run, in case they might have disturbed the cache and somehow triggered one or more of the bombs. But then Ned noted some more printing below the word bombs. It was defused. "Wow," he called out. "For a moment I thought it might be our last second on Earth." "Don't think I wasn't scared too," Nancy confessed. At this moment, they both heard a plane. Had Bruce taken off? They looked in his direction, but the craft was still on the ground. "Somebody else is coming," Nancy exclaimed. "Maybe it's the Sky Phantom. If so, we mustn't let him see us." "There's no place for us to hide around here," Ned pointed out. Nancy felt that the first thing they should do would be to heap dirt over the boxes. She and Ned worked frantically to do this. The sounds of the oncoming plane were louder now. Suddenly an idea came to Nancy. Both she and Ned were wearing long-sleeved, dark sweaters and dark jeans. She suggested that they take their arms out, put them down inside their sweaters, and pull part of the knitted material over their heads. Then we'll curl up on the ground and hope we won't be spotted. Quickly they did this, then waited, holding their breaths. Would the plane settle down near them? Was the pilot the Sky Phantom? Nancy listened carefully and was sure the sound was the same as that of Roger Payne's stolen plane. Evidently, its pilot had spotted the Lady Luck. It was doubtful that he had seen the two detectives on the ground, however, because while the craft dragged the area, it made no attempt to land. Instead, the plane went on and was soon out of sight. Nancy and Ned pulled their sweaters down. He remarked, "Wow, that was a close call." He laughed. "It's my first experience of suffocation because of an airplane flying overhead." Nancy chuckled. "There's a first time for everything. Well, I think we'd better get back to our own plane and report this whole discovery to Pop Hamilton. By the way, Ned, he's a deputy sheriff." Bruce was standing outside the craft. He said, "I thought that plane was Roger Payne's, and I was afraid the pilot would spot you two. Thank goodness you're all right." Nancy told him about their disguise, and he laughed. "Very ingenious." After hearing the entire story, he said, "I suppose you want to get right back and report all this to Pop Hamilton." "Yes, we do," Nancy replied. To the girls' complete surprise, Bruce now said, "Ned, how about you taking the controls?" "I'd like to," the Emerson student replied with a wink at the girl detective. Nancy stared unbelievingly at the two of them. "Are you kidding?" she asked. Ned now admitted that he too had been taking flying lessons. "I couldn't let you get ahead of me," he said to Nancy. Ned proved to be an excellent pilot. When he brought the plane down smoothly on the flying school's runway, both Bruce and Nancy praised him. She added, "That really was a marvelous surprise, Ned, and you kept your secret well." Bruce drove them to the Hamilton Ranch. Fortunately, Pop Hamilton was near the entrance and heard their story. The rancher's eyes opened wide in amazement. "Something must be done at once," he exclaimed. "We must remove those buried rifles and bombs and try to capture the Sky Phantom and his buddies." Bruce, who had stood by, now spoke up. "I'm sure all my instructor friends at the school would be glad to help." They discussed the best way to accomplish what they wanted to do. Several schemes were mentioned and discarded. It seemed to the flying group that the best way to catch the Sky Phantom was in the air. Nancy said, "How about several planes surrounding the Phantom Flyer when he comes? If he disappears into the cloud, we can force him to surrender." Bruce and Ned thought this was an excellent idea, and finally Pop was convinced. Getting into the spirit of the game, he said, "We'll start off at sunset." End of chapter 18.